Hello, and welcome to another episode of our mini podcast, I Built a Company That Makes a Difference by B1, where we talk to founders of sustainable businesses to get their quick takes on how and why they started their companies and some lessons that they've learned along the way. Today, we're talking to Alyssa Cherry, the founder of Fillaree, a small batch liquid soap factory in Durham, North Carolina. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yay, so happy to be here.
Cool. I'm really excited to learn more about Fillaree and what exactly it is that you guys do. So
Yes,
let's
definitely.
jump into some questions. First off, tell me, or tell us rather, a little bit about yourself and tell us about Fillaree. Your story starting Fillaree revolves around a really sobering period of your life. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so the journey from that part and that point in my life to Fillory definitely was like, a few years process. But what really kind of made me wake up and think about the products that I was using and like the food I was consuming and just really kind of led to a point where I needed like a wake up call in my life was my mother and my son both were diagnosed with cancer, like a certain type of cancer within a 6 month period. So my mother got diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. And then, 3 months later, I had my son, and he was born with a benign, like neuroectodermal tumor, growing from his the lining of the brain. Then he had to have surgery and have treatment and stuff, and luckily both of them are okay and still with us today. But that really intense medical kind of scary, life threatening, circumstances with these two people that are, some of the most dear people to you on the whole entire planet, made me really think about health, what we're putting on our body, what we're eating, and just, cancer is definitely something that's linked to toxins in our environment in the foods we eat. And so that really led me to start inspecting all of the things that were in my house and that were coming, around my family and I. And I think that from there, I kind of, started looking into, how to consume items and, plastics and how things are packaged. And that kind of led to a journey, thinking more critically about, not just what goes in the product, but how is the product packaged, or how is this having an effect on on the planet. So it kind of started with that point and then led into, a more sustainability, kind of like a low waste, zero waste kind of piece over the years.
Wow, what an unbelievably and unimaginably difficult period of time. You said within 3 months, those two diagnoses were within 3 months.
Yeah. It definitely, I remember I was 6 months pregnant, and my mom, had a very small, family baby shower. I was visiting Arizona, but I was living in North Carolina, and everything was, fine. And then when I got back to North Carolina, 2 months later, she got the diagnosis. And then I had my son, and then I had him, and then 3 months after he was born, we noticed something growing really rapidly, like protruding through his fontanelle. And it was just like, within 3 weeks, we were in surgery. The surgery was supposed to be an hour. It ended up being 7 hours. He had to have a partial craniectomy. And then, after that, of course, we had to do a lot of doctor's visits to make sure that it was not growing or continuing to grow. And he had to have a plate put in his skull, 2 years later, when it was finally like kind of, healed up. So yeah, and like I said, she had to do chemo and obviously have surgery, and she, had to go through over a year and a half process of healing. And luckily she's been in remission. And then my son's was a little different. It wasn't necessarily like it was a benign tumor, but it was life threatening, and it was really, really dangerous, and you definitely did have to keep an eye on that. And yeah, so yeah, that really was, especially in retrospect, thinking about Fillaree, like thinking about where that kind of really intense shift, life kind of change, happened. I wasn't necessarily the most unhealthy person by any means, but it definitely was something that I was not really thinking about critically. It really changed the way I thought about a lot of things.
Oh, I imagine. So that just set you into like a quest to figure out, as you said, everything in your house, what are we consuming? What are we directly and indirectly consuming? What are we putting in on our body and the air? So that just set you into a quest. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. Yeah, I can imagine. So can you, in the midst of this, can you describe kind of the moment when you decided like, all right, I either I cannot find what I'm looking for or I'm horrified by what I am finding. Thus, I'm going to start my own business.
Yeah, so there was, there's always there, especially this was like, gosh, when was this? This was like 2008, right? This is a long time ago, but there was definitely there were, natural options on the shelves of like, co-ops and health food stores and Whole Foods and stuff like that. There definitely were natural options for, a lot of food, and then also cleaning and soap products. So I was using, a natural soap, natural cleaners in my house. And then basically, like, over the years, I just really became just really really impacted by, the images of plastic oceans, like floating, plastic mounds in the oceans. I feel like I started, really thinking about the environment, and sustainability and global warming became really like scary, and I think I just started wanting to, I've always considered myself someone who thinks the world can be a better place if we care enough, and if we try to make a difference. I believe that you can. I feel like that's always been who I am at the core. So as the, you know overwhelming global warming, kind of dialogue and information, started really, bombarding everyone. But I just became really, concerned with those problems as well. So I started, bringing my own reusable water bottle everywhere I went. I started bringing my own coffee cup everywhere I went. I started, in my second child, my daughter, I used cloth diapers. I started composting, and I just felt like this overwhelming problem of global warming, and like the seas are rising, and just like, climate change, right, like is so un like unfixable.
Mm,
It feels so overwhelming, but all of these little changes that I was making in my life felt like I was making a difference. And even
mhm,
though maybe it was just a feeling I had, or maybe a hope and a belief I had, that if we all do these little things, we all work on trying to reduce our families or our personal consumption, it will have some kind of an impact. And I almost felt like I could control it a little bit. Whereas anything else I did, I just couldn't feel like I could control it. I was like, I don't live in a walkable city. Like, I do have to drive. I do visit my family, like every other year I fly on a plane, you know what I mean? Like there are things that I just cannot necessarily, I don't want to give up. I cannot give up at this point, but these little things, they just really felt like it wasn't too challenging, and I was making a difference. So basically, like I ended up I had this natural cleaning spray bottle, a natural cleaning spray that I used, and I would buy the refill and I would fill it up, and then I would recycle it. And I just started hearing about how recycling is not really the best option. If you can reuse the same water bottle over and over, it's much better than buying a recyclable one. If you can, compost something, of course, it's better than throwing it away. And I was like, I just wish that I could refill this spraying bottle. Like, why can't I refill this spray bottle anywhere? This is so frustrating to me. And I thought for probably 2 years, why doesn't someone do this? This is so silly. Like, I feel like I would totally bring my bottles and my soap bottles to refill, but there's nowhere to do that anywhere near me. And then I took a trip out to California. I lived in Los Angeles right before I moved to North Carolina, and I took a trip to California to visit some friends. And I walk into this farmer's market. It must be like 2013. Yeah, it was 2013. Actually, we were in this shop, I believe is still there. We were in Ventura. We were in Ventura, California, right outside of Los Angeles. And my husband's walking in front of me, and he walks into the store, and he comes out and he's like, "You're gonna lose your mind." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "This is the thing that you've been talking about for like these past 2 years. This is happening." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what are you?" And I walk in, and it's this refill shop, and they have these like huge glass, big pump like jars. and they have everything. They have cleaning spray, and they have like laundry detergent, and they have toothpaste, and they have like dish soap, and then they have face cream, and then they have like eye drops. They have like every single thing, and they have this wall of jars. And I was like, oh my God, something about just seeing it that like happen and having it be reality was just so profound to me. And I was so excited. And of course, I like, bought a few things that I could, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This is like literally a dream come true. The next day I went to a farmer's market, and there was these two women filling up all these bottles, and I was just like, I was actually happy to be with my mother and my sister. And I looked at them and I said, do you guys think I could, start like a refillable soap company? Like, do you think I could teach myself how to make soap and do something like this in North Carolina? Because like, this is crazy. Like, this is what I feel like I should do. And they were like, yeah, I'm sure it's totally easy. I'm sure it's not that hard. You should totally do it. Like, just like, like not really thinking too much about it. But I was like, okay, it was almost like they had given me the permission to like really consider this. Came home and watched, I don't know, maybe 80 hours of YouTube videos, the same YouTube video over and over and over and over and over, how to make liquid soap. Bought the one book. There's one book in the history of books about how to make your own liquid soap. Bought that book, read it cover to cover, like 800 times, and then tried to make soap, around like New Year's that year. Tried 75 more times, finally got it good enough to the point where it was very similar to Dr. Bronner's, which is what I was using. I joined, submitted it to a farmer's market. I got accepted to the farmer's market, and I was selling soap, within 6 months at a farmer's market. Yeah, and I was making it in crock pots in my kitchen.
Oh, I like this story a lot. Oh my gosh. Okay, so
Whole story. Sorry, I hope it wasn't too detailed, but yeah, that's pretty much how it happened.
that's a fantastic story. Okay, so California, seeing with your own eyes, actually this thing that I've been dying for, this is possible. And then instead of being like, how do I get somebody to make this possible over in North Carolina, you were like, this is me. This is what I'm here to do. This is me. I'm doing this. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it definitely was. It also came from at that time, the zero waste culture was really just starting. Like, it was very, very new. There was like one book, like this French woman, Zero Déchet is in French, zero waste, but she had a book. There was like a few bloggers, and that was pretty much it. And Instagram was wide open, like it was
Right.
just, it was still Instagram. It was still kind of organic. And I feel like there was a culture of DIY everything. So if you really wanted to be zero waste, you had to have a mason jar, and you had to do every single thing yourself. You had to make your own toothpaste, make your own soap, make your own dish.
Right.
And I thought, this is crazy. I have
That's
two
less
children.
accessible. Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I can barely make a piece of toast in some mornings. And I think that there needs to be an option where, I would go somewhere and refill though. Like, I would do that, right? But there was just nowhere. It was either DIY or like just buy and recycle the normal kind of stuff. So
Right.
I was like, maybe other people would also refill. And it also, a little bit of it was like, if you don't have time to do everything yourself, I really wanted to make it easy and accessible to be able to refill, and reuse the same container with also, of course, it was the baseline of like, it's going to have to be the most natural stuff that you could buy, only essential oils, vegan, palm oil free, because anyone who cares enough to refill is going to want to not be refilling toxic products.
That makes okay. So you talked about, yes, you mentioned things like seeing super upsetting images of just like floating mounds of plastic in the ocean and et cetera. In recycling, yes, it's if you can do something to prevent you before even it gets to recycling, like that's a better option. So what is the issue with even biodegradable plastic packaging?
So I think that I think it can be a really great, alternative and option if you do compost it. I find that most people that are using the majority of or I don't know, I find like, at least like whenever I go to restaurants sometimes, and coffee shops that have compostable cups and compostable, but they literally don't even have a compost pile. So I'm
Right.
like, oh, I'm
Right.
supposed to take this home. And also, a lot of those compostable plastics, you can't do it in a home compost. It really has to be composted in a commercial facility. So even
Okay.
if I was like extra, and I'm like, I'm going to make sure I put this dirty cup back into my bag and take it home to my home compost, it still wouldn't even really, turn into nothing in that thing. So I think it is a really great option. There's like tons of innovation, and I'm super excited for those options. But I think I'm almost probably maybe a little bit too overly simplistic, as in like, if you can just reuse the same bottle,
right.
no way, like, that really is a simple way to avoid so much waste and so many resources being wasted by making millions and millions of biodegradable plastic cups, and also making new plastic bottles to then be recycled. It's like you buy the bottle from overseas, it gets filled with a liquid here in the States, you take it home, you recycle it, it goes to a facility, and then it gets shipped back to overseas, where hopefully it gets turned into another bottle. So I think that if you just have one bottle and then you just take it back and forth, that is just, I think that the impact is almost exponential, as when it comes to reducing your waste, and then also not creating so many new things in the system.
That
So
makes perfect sense.
yeah, I just think that being an option, I think, having that, and it hadn't been an option. It's just it's taking trash, or taking compost. Having a way to reuse is something that the infrastructure isn't really there. And I think that it should be there. I think it should at least be an option for people.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, that's giving me another way of looking at this as well. You have an insane FAQ section on your website. It's one of the most thorough I have ever seen. So this leads me to my next question. What has been the public response around Durham to Fillaree over the past decade? And have you seen, or I'm sure you have, so let me rephrase this, what have been some of the notable evolutions in consumer habits that you've seen just in your own community since starting Fillaree?
Yeah, so we can thank Dikshita, who is, has been working with me and working with us for 3 years, for the really thorough, amazing FAQ section. She has been, she's, chief operation officer here at Fillaree. So she does so many things, but she also has dealt with a lot of customer service, being part of the storefront for the first few years she was here. So she compiled that really amazing, thorough FAQ. And I think it's just like basically all of the questions that she has gotten and that she would got, putting up there. So it just makes our lives a little bit easier. So we've had a lot of time to talk to a lot of customers about a lot of, a lot of things, and obviously get all those questions and put those up there. And the response from Durham, so I, tell people all the time, I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona, and I do not think, I'm really glad I started Fillaree in Durham, North Carolina, because it's really already has this really baseline level of like progressive thinking people. People are early adopters. They kind of think outside the box. They really want to support local business and small business in huge ways. Like they just really show up. And I think that especially in 2014, me showing up and trying to be like, so you buy this bottle of soap, but then you bring it back to me
Yeah.
and I refill it. And now you pay less money, you just pay per the ounce at that point. And then you take it home and then you bring it back and you refill, even that little bit was so kind of new and different. And I think that in certain places, it really would not have taken on. You wouldn't have had the minimum amount of people that you needed to make a business like this work. But in Durham it did work. And in Durham it definitely really went from one customer to 5 to 500, like to 5,000.
Amazing.
I think that being in Durham has been really, really instrumental to that. And North Carolina as a whole, they have just much more of a conservative, when it comes to the sustainability and the environment and waste in particular. I feel like it just feels much more conservative here than it does out in Arizona. It just seems like it's just a different culture when it comes to resources. Like I remember like when I first moved here, there was a drought and there were these little table tents on the table, and it was like, we will give you a glass of water if you ask for it, but only if you ask for it. There's a drought. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like Phoenix is a desert, and like there's never been an issue. There's like water, flowing out of every single, hose and everything. So I think North Carolina has been really, really great. Now we actually have over probably about 120 storefronts nationwide that sell our soap as well. So while it started here, we have always been able to ship our soaps in bulk to refill stores. And then they ship back the empty, the empty vessels that they're like these little smart bottles, they ship them back to us. We wash, sanitize, and refill them. So because I went from like seeing maybe 5 refill shops open up to like there must be like 5,000 refill shops across the country. It's just popping up everywhere. It is so incredible to see, how like just how many small businesses are opening because of this concept, and just how beautiful all of these businesses are because they're really mindful, they're really involved in their community, they're really putting planet over profits, and they're really trying to do what they can to make an impact. And they're really glad to have found Fillaree because we are very similar to them, and we sell them the soap in a way that feels really good too. So yeah, I feel like consumer demand has changed quite a bit, as evidenced by all of these new shops popping up all over the country.
Oh, that is such good news. And that's really great news for your business. Your operations have expanded from locally to nationwide now.
Yes, yes, yeah. We're actually, I think, we're going to send our first shipment to a beautiful little shop in Puerto Rico called La Isla. So it's like, I mean, that's technically, it's off the continent, right? So that's exciting for us too. So
Oh,
yeah.
amazing. That's fantastic news. All right. Well, looking ahead, it's still technically kind of the beginning of the year. We're still in Q1. What does 2023 look like for you and for Fillaree?
2023 is definitely focused on production and really focus on production. Like I am an entrepreneur that is, I feel like my creative outlets are finding new projects, finding new things to like new groups to work with. But I am completely focused to streamlining production, being able to meet this increasing demand. So hiring and scaling to the next level, and this Q1 is so important. So that's going to take, probably a lot longer than I think, like everything. So by the end of 2023, we definitely will be making a lot more soap than we are now.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so expansion time.
Yes,
Cool.
scaling up. Yes, yes, yes. Making bigger batches.
Good. That's great to hear. Um, so we have a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners who listen to our podcast. So the last part of this is a section of questions that we ask everybody. So for you, answer me these 3 questions. What do you feel has been your biggest success to date?
Um, oh my gosh, I don't know why that is like, I think just oh yeah, let's see, being able to pay myself. So, as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, as someone that doesn't have any, no startup funding, like no, everything's been very scrappy over at Fillaree. So I definitely hired a few people before I found it like needed that before I could figure out how to like make enough money, sell enough soap to pay myself. So like the day that I actually cut myself a very small but like very proud paycheck, that was like the biggest success, because that was something that was just it was so hard to get to that point. And I think that just really was like, I can do this long term, like this is going to work. If I can get here, then I can get here, then I can get here. So I think that was a really proud moment for me, at least internally, for
That
sure.
is not a small milestone for business owners, for small business owners, for entrepreneurs. That is not a small milestone.
Yeah, it's like you always put it somewhere else, right? Because it's almost like you're feeding that thing, and you're like, if I can just get by, and it's like, luckily, my husband and I, we were living off one income for a while, off and on over the years. So it was like grin and bear it, like, okay, we'll just go back to that, and then hopefully one day I'll be able to do this, and then hopefully one day it'll really be able to be something much bigger, and maybe like pay yourself back for all those years. We'll see what happens.
Awesome. Okay, well, the opposite of that. What
Yeah.
would you consider your biggest failure to date?
I think that any time that all my like there's been like all quite like little things that I definitely would probably consider failures. And I think what I would rather say is like every time that I have had something that I do consider a failure, it's something and it's a time that like I didn't follow my intuition, and that I kind of rationalized myself like, oh, this should work because of this, or I'm going to keep on trying this because of this reason and this reason. I think that every time there's definitely been a few products that I have thought would be really, really great fits that just didn't take off. So I probably would say the biggest one of all of those would be a Kickstarter that we did to fund a condensed soap, which in theory was, super great, was going to work out. It was just basically our soap, but you would put it in and add water, into it. And I think it just, it ended up being our customers like their soap the way it is. They're like, we just like the refill. We like to pour it in. We don't want to add water. We don't want to shake it up. And, of course, I invested probably about a year and a half, 2 years. Maybe I broke even on the Kickstarter. You raise all this money, but nobody knows how much money you had to put into the Kickstarter to actually like even make it happen. So maybe I broke even, probably ended up at a bit of a loss. And, that was a big learning lesson. And that was just, like I said, focus on what's working. And that's why in 2023, I'm like, I know the demand's out there and the potential's out there, but I need to focus on what's working first and focus on like laying down the, shoring up the groundwork. And I think that that is something I've learned over the years. Every time I've ventured off, I've always been led back to like, people want the refillable soap. They don't want, this bath salt or this new thing or this da 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 da. So
Oh, that's
that's
good. That's like a really actionable piece of insight for the entrepreneurs who are listening right now. That's a good one. And it's so funny. I keep asking the same question with the same wording. And, entrepreneurs, people who started their own business, it's a particular type of person. And everybody kind of bristles at the word failure because they're like, no, it's a learnings. These are learnings. They're not failures, these are learnings. So to repurpose that, I really like that. It's because it's a really actionable piece of feedback, which is like focus on my core product, the thing that is working, really focus on that. And
yeah,
kind of
like
time box
for sure, for
expansion.
sure. Yeah, and it's like people are like go back to the mission, and yeah, like the mission as
Mhm.
well. But like the core, it's like what has already been like, how can you almost improve that? Because every time you deviate and you think, and especially if we get bored or we're like, oh, look at that challenge, oh, look that person's doing that. Oh, that would be cool if I did it that way.
Yeah.
It's like it's just going to suck that energy out of like what what maybe you came to do, what you should be doing, and then also what your customers are expecting and kind of already wanting, because that's important. Those are because if without those customers, like you're not going to be able to continue, your business, perhaps. I'm sure it all varies depending on business, but I just feel like definitely, and I've definitely had quite a few failures and distractions, but they all do revolve along those lines of like getting a little distracted and kind of trying something new when I kind of should have been focusing on what I already had going on.
Well, that might be the answer to this next question, but I'll ask it anyway. What's the most important lesson you feel you've learned to date?
Go with your gut,
Mm.
trust your instinct, um, even in desperate times. And I know that really, if you don't know your gut, like I remember there's definitely was a time in my life where I didn't know what that voice was. I just really didn't have it yet. That's okay, but I think hopefully everyone finds it, because I really would hope that everybody did have some sort of like, when they're doing something and it kind of doesn't feel right, or they're making a big decision and they're finding they're having to rationalize themselves a little bit too much, I think that listening to that instinct is going to be is really important. And then the other thing is, when you're really like burnt out and you just want to quit and you're just like, this is just too much. Like I'm going to, why don't I just work for somebody else? I would be making like, twice as much money or three times or whatever. And I would be able to work from home some days. And I would, whenever you're at that point, which like it happens to everybody, I think what I have done, and the only way it's gone back is just I have been like, I've gone back to like the work and just kind of like gone back to just the rhythm of like just walking through and almost like faking it, for the next week or the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks. And then I think eventually you'll probably find out, are you really going to leave? But most likely you'll fall back in love with something and you'll like be like, okay, like now I remember why I'm here, you know? And I think that that has been something that has helped me over like at least 2 or 3 times when I really have wanted to kind of throw in the towel, essentially. I've just been able to go back and just keep on grinding it out just a little bit longer. And then I've had a breakthrough, or then I've had a new customer, or then I've had something really exciting happen. And I think that, you know, I'm glad I didn't just like, okay, I'm done. This isn't working. I'm unhappy, you know, like I'm going to have to change, pivot.
All right. Okay. All right. So really sticking to it. You're right. It's such a funny thing. The two things that you mentioned, which is one, how do you like if you are not practiced at listening to your gut, just as a person, business aside, just if you're not practiced at listening to your gut and really honing into that voice, oof, how do you find that? That's one question, maybe to explore
Yeah,
for another day.
yeah,
But
for sure. I hope everybody does though. And I think the only thing I would say is if there's been a time where you knew that you should have done that, but like you didn't do it, like that was your gut. So maybe trying to identify like the past times will help you be able to realize it in real time. Maybe. I don't know. Like I
is that
said,
how you did it?
yeah, I mean, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Like it was just like what, like I knew it. Like you know, I was on the fence and I went that way. So and then that was really stupid. That was a bad move. I should not have done that. Like then I see that so clearly, and I'm like, oh, that was my gut, you know. And then after that happens so many times, and you find yourself in these positions or with these people that are toxic, or with and you're like, oh, I remember that little thing. I remember feeling pulled in that other direction, but I chose not to. And I think that after that happens, then maybe when you're in the moment, you'll be like, wait, uh-oh, it's that thing. It's that thing I'm doing. And then maybe it will be easier to listen to that gut.
I like that piece of advice. Out, broader than entrepreneurship, just
Yeah.
in life in general, because I think that's one thing, especially when you're young, but maybe not even when you're young. It's you do get a lot of advice, just like listen to your gut and what is your inner voice telling you, and you have the answer already, and it's like, wow, how do I unlock that? Where is the who's how can I tell me what the answer is then? So that I
Yeah.
like that advice beyond entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, because you've been doing this for 10 years, I like to ask if you could get 85% of the world, so not everybody, but just like a good proportion of us, consumers, to adopt a single behavior, what would that be?
We're like, I guess we're talking about, yeah, like consumer behavior. We're talking about sustainability. I would probably say, oh, I don't know why this, I would probably say, um, there's like only like 5 million things that come into my mind.
Yeah.
Probably say, um, I guess I would probably say composting would probably
Mhm.
be a really big way to significantly reduce your waste. And I think that like the methane from, you know, food waste is something, yeah, like if you're a small business, I think composting would be the easiest, perhaps, you know, I don't know, biggest thing to do. I think it would be a
Mhm.
little bit more impactful than just like, you know, yeah, composting is what I will say today.
Yeah, 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 that's a good one. Okay, good. Thank you. And then last question, where can we find you in real life, online? Where can we find you?
Yeah, so we have a website, www.fillaree.com. So fillaree.com, Fillaree.com, is our website, and that has a lot of information, a lot of FAQs. It has all of our products. You can buy, you know, a glass bottle to try it out, and then you can subscribe or buy a refill, which is a half-gallon that goes to your house, and then you can send us back the empty bag. So there's a lot of information about how our closed loop soap works. So you can find us online. You can find us in Durham at our storefront. And then you can also find us at quite a few shops all around the country. We're working on putting up a map. But we have a list right now, but we're working on putting up a map on our website. You can find us on Fair, which is like a wholesale platform. And if you are a small shop, you know, you can reach out through the website too. So yeah, we're on Instagram at fillaree.com, on TikTok, and on Facebook as well. So you can find us on all social media platforms too to find out. We're always having fun and posting a lot of, you know, good behind the scenes content on there too. So
Oh, awesome. I'm going to check that out myself.
Yes. Yes. So we're all over the place.
Alyssa, thank you so much. This has been a really enjoyable conversation. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you for hanging out with us here.
Thank you for asking me. I'm really excited for this podcast. I really, really like it. And I definitely hope that everyone, continues to listen. I really, yeah, I really appreciate you. I appreciate you doing this. And I'm very grateful, very grateful.
Thank you so much. On that note, everybody out in the audience, thanks for listening in, and we'll see you on B1.